My dad was a truck driver. Being his daughter, I spent more time in the passenger seat of his rig than I did in my own bedroom. He taught me everything: how to handle sharp turns, how to listen to the engine instead of just trusting the dashboard, and most importantly, how to trust my gut. That last lesson, it stuck with me the most. That's why when I planned a weekend getaway at my grandfather's old cabin with my 2 kids, I wasn't worried. It was supposed to be an easy, quiet trip. Just me, my 8-year-old son, Toby, and my 5-year-old daughter, Ella. My husband, Ben, was deployed overseas, so it was just the 3 of us. The plan was simple: drive up to the cabin, spend a few days in the mountains, and enjoy a break from city life. I packed our old Chevy Silverado with snacks, blankets, and a couple of grocery bags. The kids climbed into the back, already arguing over who got to pick the first song. It was one of those warm afternoons that make you want to roll the windows down and feel the breeze on your face. I had no idea, at that moment, that this trip would change everything. The first hour of the drive was uneventful. The kids were busy playing, the road was mostly empty, and I was relaxed. I knew these roads well: long stretches of highway, patches of dense forest, a few tiny gas stations along the way. Then about an hour in, I noticed something: a dark sedan, maybe 2 or 3 cars behind me. Nothing strange about that, right? But something about the way it stayed there, never passing, never falling too far back, made my stomach tighten. I shook off the feeling. I was being paranoid. Maybe they were just taking the same route, but after another 20 minutes, the car was still there. I tested something. I slowed down a little, waiting to see if they would pass. They didn't. I changed lanes. So did they. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't a coincidence. I forced myself to stay calm. The last thing I needed was to scare the kids. "Hey, guys," I said lightly. "Who wants a snack? Let's stop at the next gas station." "Me," Ella shouted. Toby barely looked up from his book, just nodding. I kept my voice steady, but my hands gripped the wheel tighter. Up ahead, I spotted an old gas station. One of those lonely stops with a flickering neon sign and a single rusty pickup parked outside. I turned in, my heart pounding. If this car was just going the same way, they'd keep driving. The sedan didn't stop. Instead, it passed by, continuing down the road. I exhaled, letting myself relax. Maybe I really was being paranoid. We went inside, grabbed some snacks, and used the restroom. I chatted with the cashier about the weather, trying to shake the unease in my chest. When we got back in the truck, the road outside was empty. I told myself to relax. We were fine, but we weren't. 15 minutes later, we were back on the road. The kids were munching on chips, and I had the radio turned low. The highway stretched ahead, dark trees lining both sides. Then, in my rearview mirror, I saw it. Headlights far in the distance, just a faint glow. I squinted. My stomach twisted. The headlights flickered slightly, the same sedan. My hands went cold. How? How had they gotten behind me again? Had they pulled off the road and waited? I felt a slow wave of fear crawl up my spine. I couldn't tell the kids. Not yet. I kept driving, forcing my breathing to stay steady. The road ahead curved into a heavily wooded stretch, miles of nothing but trees on both sides. If anything happened here, no one would see. I pressed the gas. The sedan sped up too. My heart pounded. I checked my phone. No signal. Think. The cabin was still about an hour away. There were no more towns, no more gas stations, just road and trees. The sedan was getting closer. I tried to come up with a plan, but I was out of options. If I stopped, they could pull up behind me. If I kept going, I was leading them straight to the cabin, and then the worst thing happened. The headlights disappeared. 1 second they were there, the next gone. My pulse thundered in my ears. I checked the mirrors, turned my head slightly, but nothing. Had they turned off, or were they still there just with their lights off? I made my decision. I wasn't stopping. I wasn't leading them anywhere. I took a deep breath, checked my mirrors one last time, and hit the gas. The cabin for. The next 30 minutes I drove like my life depended on it. The kids had fallen asleep, completely unaware that their mom was trying not to panic. When I finally turned onto the dirt road leading to the cabin, I felt my muscles unclench just slightly. I pulled in fast, parked, and shut off the truck. Silence. The wood stretched around us, dark and endless. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, waiting. 1 minute, 2 minutes, nothing. No headlights, no sound of an engine. The sedan was gone. I let out a long breath and forced myself to relax. Maybe they'd finally given up. I carried the kids inside, locking every door and double-checking the windows. We were safe. At least that's what I told myself. But even hours later, as I sat by the window staring out into the dark woods, I couldn't shake the feeling. Somewhere out there, someone was watching. And they had followed me all the way here. I was 19 when I got a job taking care of an old man named Mr. Laurent. His house was tucked away at the edge of town, surrounded by trees and overgrown bushes that made it feel like it had been forgotten by time. It was one of those big, old houses that probably used to be fancy but now just felt empty. My uncle, who was a doctor, set me up with the job. He told me it'd be easy. Just check in on Mr. Laurent, make sure he ate, lock the doors at night, and that was it. He's harmless, my uncle had said, just a little lonely. The first few days were quiet. Mr. Laurent didn't talk much. He mostly sat in his library, reading old newspapers, sipping tea that smelled so bitter I could barely stand the scent. He had this weird habit of keeping all the lights off after sunset. Even when it got dark enough that you could barely see, he refused to turn them on. "One too many eyes in the dark," he muttered when I reached for a lamp one night. I didn't really know what he meant, but I figured it was just one of those things old people say. Everything seemed fine. Until the fourth night. I was in the kitchen, washing dishes, when I noticed something outside the window. A shadow. First I thought it was just my reflection in the glass, but no. It was a man. Standing completely still at the edge of the trees, staring straight at the house. A chill ran down my spine. I turned off the water and listened. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Then I heard it. A noise from the front porch. A slow creak. Like someone was stepping onto the wooden boards. I held my breath and took a step toward the door, my hands already starting to sweat. "Hello?" My voice barely came out. Silence. Then, bang. Something hit the door. Hard. I jumped back, my heart hammering in my chest. I ran to the library, expecting Mr. Laurent to be just as startled, but he was sitting in his usual spot, calmly flipping through his newspaper like nothing had happened. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my voice shaky. Without looking up, he simply said, "Ignore it." Ignore it? The door had just been slammed, like someone was trying to break in. I stood there, waiting, unsure of what to do. Then it came again. Bang. Bang. The door shook. Under the force. I rushed to lock it, but for some reason, my fingers just wouldn't work. The deadbolt felt stuck, or maybe my hands were just too sweaty to grip it properly. And then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The night went silent. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined that shadow standing in the trees, watching, waiting. The next morning I told myself it was probably nothing. Maybe a drunk guy passing by or some neighborhood kids messing around. But when I went outside to take out the trash, I saw something that made my stomach drop. A footprint, deep in the dirt right at the edge of the trees. Fresh. Someone had been standing there, watching. Inside, Mr. Laurent was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at his tea. His hands rested on the rim of the cup, but he didn't drink it. "You saw him, didn't you?" he asked suddenly. I hesitated. "Saw who?" He didn't answer right away. His fingers tapped lightly against the ceramic like he was thinking. Then he said, almost too quietly, "He always comes back." I wanted to ask him more. Who was he? Why did he come back? But the look on Mr. Laurent's face stopped me. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't surprised. He just looked tired, like he'd been expecting it. That night I made sure every door and window was locked before heading to bed. I even checked twice, but at exactly 3 a.m. the knocking started again. Louder this time, faster, not just on the front door, on the walls, the windows. It was everywhere. Bang, bang, bang. The house trembled, my breath caught in my throat. Then, a whisper. Right outside my bedroom door. "I found you." My whole body went cold. I slapped a hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. The knocking didn't come back. The whisper didn't come again. But I stayed frozen in place until the first hints of morning light slipped through the curtains. When I finally got the courage to move, I crept downstairs and stepped outside. My whole body tensed as I turned toward the door. There, smeared across the wood, was a single handprint. Not dirt, not paint, blood. I quit that job the same day. I didn't pack my things, didn't say goodbye to Mr. Laurent. I just left. My uncle tried to convince me I was imagining things, but I know what I saw. I never went back to that house, and I never heard from Mr. Laurent again. But sometimes, late at night when I walk past dark windows, I still get that feeling. Like someone's watching, like someone's waiting. Because whoever was outside that house that night wasn't looking for Mr. Laurent. They were looking for me. I had the whole day off, and it was one of those cold, rainy days where you just want to stay inside. The rain had been coming and going all day, sometimes light, sometimes heavy. Since I didn't have anywhere to be, I spent most of the day playing video games and just relaxing. Around 5 in the evening, the rain picked up and I could see flashes of lightning in the distance. It seemed like the perfect night to watch a scary movie, especially with the storm setting the mood. So I made some dinner, turned off all the lights, and curled up on the couch for a couple of hours. By the time the movie was over, the storm had gotten even worse. The wind howled outside, and the rain pounded against the windows. The lightning strikes were much closer now, lighting up the whole sky. I wasn't really tired yet, so I got up to stretch my legs and refill my water. That's when I saw something. As I turned toward the hallway, a shadow moved across the wall. It happened so fast, a quick flicker, almost like someone had darted out of sight. I stood frozen for a second, my heart pounding. Did I really see that? Or was it just my imagination? After all, I had just finished watching a horror movie. Trying to shake it off, I walked over and checked the hallway. Nothing. Just an empty space. Maybe it was a flash of lightning reflecting off something. Or maybe my brain was just playing tricks on me. Either way, I decided not to think about it too much. I refilled my water and peeked outside. The storm was really going wild. The trees were bending under the wind, and the roads outside looked more like rivers. We didn't usually get storms like this, and honestly, our town wasn't built for them. I went back to the couch and put on some YouTube videos, hoping to relax a bit, but I wasn't really paying attention. My mind kept wandering, and before I knew it, I saw it again. This time, it was on the wall behind the TV. Another shadow, moving just for a second. It looked like someone peeking around the corner. I spun around fast, my heart hammering in my chest. Nothing. No movement. No sign that anyone had been there. But I knew I saw something. Trying to convince myself it was nothing, I still couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in my gut. Twice now? That wasn't normal. Was I just exhausted? I didn't feel tired, but something about this whole night felt off. I sat there for another 15 minutes trying to ignore the weird feeling creeping up my spine. Eventually, I decided to just go to bed. Maybe I'd feel better in the morning. I turned off the TV and headed upstairs, but instead of going straight to bed, I took a hot shower, hoping it would help me relax. The sound of the water drowned out the storm for a little while, and I started to feel calmer. Then, out of nowhere, a loud bang shook the whole house. It was so loud and deep that I felt it in my chest. My whole body tensed up as I quickly shut off the water. The house went completely silent. Too silent. Even the storm outside suddenly seemed distant, like everything was holding its breath. I stood there, my ears straining for any sound. But I heard nothing. No footsteps. No voices. Just a stillness that made my skin crawl. Heart pounding, I threw on my clothes and slowly stepped out into the hallway. My stomach was in knots, but I forced myself to go downstairs. First the living room, then the kitchen. Everything looked normal, until I saw the back door. It was completely busted open. The door was barely hanging onto the top hinge, swinging slightly. The other two hinges had been ripped out of the door frame. Splinters of wood covered the floor beneath it. It looked like something or someone had slammed it open with incredible force. Panic shot through me. Someone had been inside my house. I ran upstairs, locked myself in the bathroom, and called 911. As I sat there waiting for the cops, one terrifying thought kept racing through my mind. Had someone been watching me this whole time? When the police arrived, they searched every inch of the house. No one was there. But then they told me something even worse. The door hadn't been forced open from the outside. It had been blown open from the inside. Whoever had been in my house was already inside before they left. And they left angry, like they were frustrated or furious about something. My stomach dropped as I realized what that meant. Those shadows I kept seeing, they weren't my imagination. Someone was in my home, moving when I wasn't looking, watching me. I don't know how long they were there. I don't know why they were there. But the way they left, slamming the door so hard it nearly broke, it wasn't normal. It was like they were furious about something, and I still don't know what. Since that night, I haven't slept well in this house, and honestly, I don't think I ever will. Spending the weekend alone in a quiet little bookstore sounded like a dream. After weeks of non-stop work and crowded city streets, I was ready for a break. My friend Sam owned a small bookshop in an old part of town, and since they were heading out of town, they offered to let me stay there for a couple of nights. The place had a cozy upstairs loft, and the idea of being surrounded by books with no one to bother me sounded perfect. The store itself was tiny, squeezed between an old tailor shop that had been shut down for years and a record store that only seemed to sell jazz albums. During the day, a few customers wandered in and out, flipping through paperbacks or chatting about their favorite authors. But by night, the place was completely mine. At 9 o'clock, I locked the front door, flipped the close sign, and plopped onto a stool behind the counter with a book in hand. The store was peaceful, with only the soft hum of the ceiling fan and the occasional honk of a car in the distance. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something move. I glanced up at the big front window, expecting to see someone walking by outside. But the street was empty. Maybe it was just a reflection from a passing car. I shook it off and went back to my book. An hour later, I stretched, yawned, and decided to make some tea. The back room had a tiny kitchenette, just big enough for a kettle and a shelf full of mismatched mugs. As I filled the kettle, I heard a tap. Not a loud knock, just a soft, quick tap against the front window. I froze. My brain quickly ran through possibilities. The wind? A stray branch? But there were no trees outside. And the sound wasn't random. It was too intentional. Heart pounding a little faster now, I peeked around the bookshelves toward the front of the store. The large glass window showed nothing but the empty street, the flickering neon light from the jazz shop casting a weird blue glow onto the sidewalk. I exhaled, shaking my head. You're being paranoid. But as I turned away, something moved. A shadow. Not outside. Inside. My breath caught. It was just for a second, barely in my peripheral vision, but I was sure I saw it. A shape just at the edge of the bookshelves, like someone ducking out of sight. Hello? My voice came out shaky. We're closed. Nothing. I took a step forward, then another. My fingers hovered over my phone in my pocket just in case. The store was small, too small for someone to actually hide without me noticing. Still, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I walked between the shelves, checking every aisle. Nothing. I even peeked into the tiny storage room in the back. Just stacks of unsorted books and an old wooden chair. Nothing unusual. Get a grip, I told myself. You're just tired. I locked the front door again, then headed upstairs to the loft. The space was simple, a bed, a desk, and a small bathroom. I changed into an oversized t-shirt, plugged in my phone, and climbed into bed, hoping a good night's sleep would clear my head. For a while, everything was quiet. The city noise outside had faded, and the only sound was the occasional creak of the wooden floor below settling as the night cooled. Then, tap. My eyes snapped open. The same soft sound. The same window. My stomach twisted. I held my breath, straining to hear anything else. The store below was silent. Too silent. Then, the floor creaked. Not in the loft. Downstairs. I barely breathed. Someone was in the store. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking as I swiped to dial 911. But before I could press the call button, bang, a loud, violent slam. The whole loft shook. My heart felt like it was about to burst out of my chest. My first thought was that someone had just broken in. But something was off. The sound wasn't the door opening. It was the door closing, like someone had just stormed out. For a long time, I didn't move. I sat frozen in bed, listening. Finally, I forced myself to creep down the stairs, one shaky step at a time. The bookstore was empty, but the front door, it was locked, still dead-bolted from the inside. I swallowed. Art. Whoever had been in here hadn't broken in. They had been here the whole time, watching, hiding. And when they left angry. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat in the loft with my back against the wall, watching the door until the sun rose. The next morning, I left the bookstore keys on the counter and walked out. I never went back. And to this day, when I walk past that shop, I swear, just for a second, I see something move in the reflection of the window. Something just at the edge of sight. Watching.